the Sustainability Management Master's Program, you're answering one simple question. Do you care about your future generation? If you care about your kids, their grandkids, then you care about sustainability. And a sustainability manager is someone who has the tools to make people understand how they can contribute towards developing a sustainable world. We have both part-time and full-time students. Our curriculum is 30 hours. Instead of thesis, we have a research project course and a seminar course which provides them with the kind of research background they will need to be successful in their job. But at the same time, sustainability is not always everything about environment. It also relates to the business. They will take a sustainable business strategies course. They will take a project management course. Most of these courses are going to be taught by industry people, the people who are doing sustainability on a daily basis as a part of their job. Any organization that has a large number of employees and has a physical infrastructure, they will have to have a sustainability office. If you have the passion to develop and maintain a sustainable world, come to us and we will help you shape your passion into a career which will create an impact.
The Stevens Institute of Technology is proud to present the Hugo New Corporation Sustainability Seminar Series, brought to you by Brown & Caldwell, Geocetic Consultants, H2M Architect and Engineers, BEM Systems, and Catalyst Group.
Thank you for the lovely introduction. I don't think I need to say anything else. That pretty much covers it. But if you guys want to know a little bit more about how I got into the waste industry and this type of work, maybe we can talk about that in the chat. You may be familiar with my organization and with some of the work that we do. We are a nonprofit organization, the USGBC, that developed the LEED certification program, and we have a certification arm called GBCI that actually administers the certifications. So you may be loosely familiar with our organization, but what you might not realize is that we have a number of other certifications that are related to various facets of sustainability that are listed out on this slide. So today we're going to be talking about waste, but certainly if there are other areas of sustainability that you're interested in, I would encourage you to look at some of these other initiatives that we have as well, that are all listed on our website. I will say, you can see that there's a couple of different certifications listed under waste. LEED and ARC. ARC is a measurement platform that we run. LEED and ARC both do address waste, but it's more about tracking, whereas the true certification program is really diversion driven. So it's more goal oriented rather than just tracking. So I think you'll see a little bit more about what that means as we move through the presentation, but I just wanted to call out that difference right away. So I like sharing this slide. This is related to LEED, but this shows the last 20 years or so of growth in the LEED certification program, which you can see, starting off in the early 2000s, a little bit slow at first, and then a very rapid increase as we've grown that program, which has now pretty much penetrated most of the marketplace and has a large hold on transforming the building industry. True certification, which we'll talk a little bit more about how it got started, but just for some context, we've been with the USGBC for about 4 years. So we're kind of on the same trajectory that LEED is on. So what our goal is to transform the waste management industry in a similar way that LEED transformed the building industry. That's a big part of our goal. So for True, we actually started out as our own independent nonprofit called the US Zero Waste Business Council, and developed a rating system and so on to help businesses and companies track their waste. We were acquired by the USGBC in 2016 and have been working with them since then. It's been a great, it was a great opportunity for us to get involved with a larger organization that has a lot of influence and education opportunities, marketing opportunities, and so forth, and has really allowed our program to grow and expand. So before I talk too much more about True. I just want to back things up a little bit and just discuss some of the issues that are happening right now in the waste industry and why our program is relevant. So, you know, there's obviously a lot of conversation about climate change right now, and waste is something that, you know, isn't always part of the conversation. I feel like especially in this country, we tend to focus a lot on transportation and building industry and energy use and things like that. But actually waste is a really big piece of it. And it actually does tie pretty heavily into the transportation side of things, because we spend huge amounts of time and energy hauling our waste all around the world and all around the country. I'm calling in from Brooklyn, New York, and I know here in New York City, you know, we send our trash all across the US to the Midwest, to the Southeast, up north into Canada even. And so it's, you know, the amount of time and energy that is spent moving that material around is enormous. And the amount of time that we spend moving packaging and packaged materials around, there's a huge amount of carbon and GHG emissions that go into that from a trucking and transportation standpoint. So that's a big piece of it. And that's just the transportation of waste, right? That's not even like the creation of it or the management of it. It's just the moving it around once it's created. And then of course, we have the issue with landfills, which landfills are currently filling up. They also create a tremendous amount of methane gas. They're the largest creator of methane gas in the world. And methane is, of course, a highly toxic greenhouse gas pollutant and has a really big impact. So I just bring this up to, you know, kind of note that even though waste isn't really always the #1 topic that people discuss when they think about climate change, it really does tie in a big way. And it's important for us to continue to address it and tackle it. And then the other thing that I wanted to show surrounding this issue is that people think of recycling as, of course, the thing to do to counteract landfilling. And, you know, recycling is great. I love recycling. I recycle fanatically at home. But at the same time, I think we all just need to have a little bit of a wake-up call that recycling on its own just is not enough to get us out of the situation that we're in. And what this graph shows is you can see the increased amount of material that we're sending to the recycling plants, typically MRFs, over the last couple decades. And we're sending a lot more material towards recycling streams. But the problem with this is that it's not reducing the amount that's going to landfill, right? Landfill amounts are pretty much increasing. And so we just need another solution. There's just too much material out there and it's just not being properly managed. And then the other piece that goes along with this is just some of the social justice and equity issues. And this just talks about, on this slide, the international impact. It doesn't even really get into the local impact that we have, which is also huge with areas such as environmental justice neighborhoods that are impacted by incinerators and other dirty industrial operations that typically happen in Black and Brown and poor communities. But also we as a nation in the US have a tendency to export our waste and our trash to what we refer to as the global South. So that would be like Southeast Asia, India, South America to some degree and things like that. And it's just kind of this idea of sending things where we don't need to see them anymore, but the reality is that, you know, just because they're not here where we can see them, it doesn't mean that somebody isn't having to clean up our mess. So anyway, there's going to be lots of good news in this presentation, but I always like to start to kind of create the conversation of why this is an important topic. So some of the good news is that this is becoming an issue that more and more people are aware of, more and more people care about. They want to do something about it. There's also a big drive to make corporations more responsible for their materials and to really clean up their act to make sure that consumers are getting the products that they expect from an environmental and social justice perspective, and consumers are taking action and then in turn demanding that of the companies that they are purchasing from. So really the opportunity to use your voting power through the products that you're purchasing and getting connected to. And a really big important aspect of this is this idea of a Wasteburg. So the Wasteburg demonstrates, similar to an iceberg, that for every 1 ton of waste that you might generate as a consumer, what you don't see is that there's been approximately 71 tons of industrial waste that is generated before the product actually gets to you. So I don't want this to be too discouraging, but the way I think about it is that individual action is really important, right? Like, I recycle at home, I compost at home. I am even one of those people, like, I clean my plastic film and save it and hoard it away so that I can take it to a plastic film recycling center, like through TerraCycle or something, right, like that, right? So my individual action is important to me, and I want to continue doing it because it's part of how I feel like I contribute as a citizen in this way. It's an issue that I care about. At the same time, what I do as an individual is a little bit of a drop in the bucket. And it really just means that we need to continue to put pressure on corporations, on large scale companies, global organizations to really do more of the heavy lifting to change the economy. And we can talk a little bit more about what some of these policies might look like moving forward. There's some really exciting stuff that's happening in the government right now related to issues around banning single-use plastics. Also, sort of a new catchphrase called EPR, which stands for Extended Producer Responsibility, which basically means that the companies that are producing this type of material are going to be held responsible for it, and they're going to have to pay for it. So instead of the consumers paying for recycling programs, that's going to be passed along to the corporations. And so, you know, keep doing what you're doing, keep caring and keep getting involved, but really, you know, the direction that we need to go in is to continue to hold these businesses, corporations, and companies responsible for their actions. So that's actually where my program comes into play in a really big way. And we'll talk a little bit about how that works specifically. But before we do that, I just want to talk a little bit about the concept of zero waste. And the reason that I bring that up is because I think it's something that you hear about a lot. You know, you hear about like Instagram influencers leading a zero waste lifestyle, or you might hear about a company, you know, having a zero waste to landfill goal or something like that. But I think one of the challenges that we're seeing in the industry right now is that there tends to be a lack of alignment about what zero waste actually means and how we can verify that companies, facilities, individuals even are actually doing what it takes to get there. So one of the things that my organization does, the USGBC, is we help create guidelines and alignment around sustainability issues. So if you're familiar with LEED certification, or if you learn more about LEED certification, you know, during this course, what you'll see is what we did there very similarly is we took a concept that people are talking about, green building. Green building was something that a lot of people were talking about in like the 80s, 90s, even early 2000s, energy efficiency, green building, sustainability. But what did that mean? And there wasn't necessarily a lot of, again, consensus or alignment or verification about how companies, developers that said they were doing green building and energy efficiency without a real way to verify what that actually meant. It was very easy for there to be greenwashing, which I'm sure is a term that you've heard of before. So what the USGBC did was it created this criteria for what it meant to be a green building, and that has gone on to transform the building industry, which is awesome. So we're basically hoping to do the same thing with zero waste. We've tried to create a definition. We've tried to create a strategy around what it actually means to be zero waste so that everybody is in agreement about what that means. And when we see a company saying that they are meeting zero waste goals, they're actually meeting real goals. So one of the ways we went about defining this was looking to what some of the experts have done in the realm of defining zero waste. So this image is called the Zero Waste Hierarchy, and it was developed by an organization that's really cool. It's called the Zero Waste International Alliance, or ZUIA, and they've done a lot of research and education around zero waste issues, which is great. And what this zero waste hierarchy does is it really breaks down the different categories and how materials can stay in their highest and best use for as long as possible. So one of the things that I think I've seen as a professional working in the waste industry is when people talk about tracking their waste materials, they often focus on like recycling and maybe composting, if they're composting, which not everybody always does, but ideally they might be, and also landfill. So the thing about recycling, composting, and landfilling is that it's great, but those are actually all referred to as downstream choices. So it basically means that the material that you're recycling or composting or whatever it might be has reached the end of its useful life. And so it's going on to be downcycled into a lower quality material. So what we see in the top two tiers of this triangle are choices that can be made to keep that material in its useful life for as long as possible. So for example, if I buy a bottle of water at a store, which hopefully I don't really buy a bottle of water, but if I have to for some reason, instead of drinking that water once and then recycling that bottle immediately, I would continue to reuse that bottle, right? I would drink out of it again and again and again. I would maybe get 15 or 20 uses out of it before eventually I would maybe recycle it. Or maybe I don't even recycle it. Maybe I turn it into a flower pot or planter or something like that, right? I reuse it. So it's reframing the conversation around not just focusing on downstream choices, but thinking about what you can do from an upstream perspective, which are things like redesigning, reducing, returning, reusing, repairing, and remanufacturing. There's all kinds of R's now. When I was growing up, we had 3 R's. We would talk about reduce, reuse, recycle. And really the conversation has kind of moved more into the recycling frame again. But what we try and do with this zero waste hierarchy and just with our conversations about waste reduction in general is we try and focus on those first 2 R's, reduce, reuse, and then some of the others. So this ties into, sorry, was there a question? No? Okay, I'm gonna keep going. So this ties into the idea of the circular economy, which might be one of those other kind of like catchphrases that you've heard of. Same way people talk about like zero waste, the circular economy, circularity, something like that. So circularity, the circular economy refers to the idea that, we're using materials, we're making them into products, and then we're finding ways to reuse them, remake them into new products that will keep them in the economy and out of the landfill. That's really the big thing. We continue to have a functional life for these products. They can be made into different and new materials that keeps them going so that we don't have to take virgin materials from the environment. And that's really what we currently have with the idea of a linear economy, right? We extract these materials from nature, we make them into products that we use, and then we dispose of them after we're done using them, and that disposal basically becomes pollution. So we're trying to get away from that into the new economy. And the great thing about that is it also is a huge job creator. So it's not just good for the environment, it's also incredibly good for the economy. If you think about it, if you just are sending something to a landfill, that's really just like one job for one person to man that landfill, right? Like they really just have to sit there, wait for a truck to show up, who dumps out all their stuff from their truck. They give the person with the truck a ticket for the amount they have to pay for the dump, and that's it. Transaction over. Kind of boring. But if you're composting or you're recycling or you're reusing, we start to get composting facilities, we start to get reuse facilities, we start to get recycling centers, and those have the opportunity to create hundreds of jobs. And right now we're only recycling like a fraction of the materials out there, like something between like 30%, somewhere around there. So, just imagine if we started to recycle, reuse, adapt up to like 90% of our resources, how many more jobs we would create, how much more opportunity there would be to have a circular economy in the industry. And I think we're starting to see conversations around this with like the Green New Deal and stuff like that. We're really pushing for that to be a bigger part of the Green New Deal, but it's really where the future is. The future is not in landfills. Landfills are also, you know, like I said earlier, filling up. So we're just not going to be able to send stuff to the landfills anymore. We need other options. Okay, so now we can finally talk about True. Now that I've given you a lot of backstory, maybe more than you wanted on the waste industry. So what True is a zero waste certification program for facilities that aims to transform the way businesses manage resources and drive the transition towards a circular economy. The goal of all of our projects that receive certification is to divert all their solid waste from landfill, incineration, which includes waste to energy and the environment. So the goal is to divert all solid waste, but our point of entry is 90%. So any facility that wants to achieve True certification has to be at a 90% diversion number in order to participate, and anything above that is going to help them earn additional points and credits, which you'll see in a little bit. I just want to point out the piece about landfill and incineration, which is that sometimes you'll see companies or facilities might have a high diversion rate, which makes it look like they're processing, you know, diverting more of their material than they actually are because they might be using an incinerator. We decided not to allow incineration or waste to energy as an acceptable diversion metric because there's a lot of those social justice and environmental justice issues, air quality and things like that associated with incineration. And really, you know, again, that's like an end use, right? That's like a downstream. If you're literally burning off material, there's going to be no successful next life for that material. It's just ash. And actually that ash ends up going to a landfill. So even if a company says that they're zero waste to landfill through incineration, since all of their leftover coal ash essentially is just going straight to the landfill, they can't actually technically make that claim. So we find it problematic and we do not allow incineration. So the way True works is that it takes that same idea of a zero waste hierarchy and it takes these different elements of like reduce and reuse, and it translates them into strategies that can be used as a roadmap to get to zero waste. So we focus on those upstream policies and practices to help our projects, you know, sort of re-envision how they're using materials. So they're using materials in a smarter way. And then those strategies are what is going to help them actually get to that 90% diversion metric. And you'll see some good examples of that, and we'll get into a little bit more. One example is Toyota, which is a, you know, everyone knows Toyota, but they are currently working towards certification. They have not received certification yet, but they're on their way. And a really good example of what they did is they had a cardboard recycling program. So they, you know, when they had materials that they needed to ship from one facility to another, they would box it up in cardboard, send it over. That material would be received, the products would be extracted, the cardboard would be flattened and then recycled. So great, right? Pretty typical, yeah, like recycling program, all good. But when they started working with True, they realized that they actually had an opportunity like, oh, we can switch from a cardboard recycling program to a reusable, returnable shipping container. And so they did that. They obviously had some upfront investment in that shipping container, but the end result is that not only did that change moving from cardboard to a returnable unit, save over the equivalent of 2.7 billion trees, but it also saved them over $1 billion in packaging cost savings. Because what they didn't realize is that every time they had to ship something, they A, had to buy the cardboard. So that's one cost. B, they had to then at the end of life pay for someone to come and haul that cardboard away. So they were actually paying for it at the front and the end, which is crazy. They had to do that every single time. Think about how much cardboard they were going through and how much money they had to spend to get that cardboard and to send it away. So when they switch to this returnable unit, once they have those materials, they don't have to buy them again, maybe not for 20, 25 years or something, because they're durable materials. So they buy them once, that's it. And then they don't have to pay someone to take them away because they're reusing them. So it just makes business sense. It's also good for the environment, and it's also good for social equity, because we're not then contributing to landfills, incinerators, and things like that. So this is exactly what we're talking about when we talk about making upstream choices. It's choices that keep materials out of the landfill. It's keeping materials even out of recycling centers. Okay. Our organizations really like True because it helps them to be a leader. It helps them to really verify that they're doing the right thing. They get the certification, which proves that they've done it. We are a third-party certification, so we have somebody else reviewing all the information to verify that it happened. It really just allows these organizations to be on the top, leading edge of the circular economy, which is huge. And they like working with us for all of these other reasons. They do really save money. They save resources. They reduce greenhouse gas. It's good for their ESG reports, creates jobs like we talked about. It really drives a lot of positive outcomes. And this is the reason why we're excited about it. And this is the reason why our clients are excited about it too. Okay, so if you're familiar with other certification programs, or even if you're not, this is kind of a common way that they tend to be rated. There's various certification levels that line up with associated points. Those point thresholds determine which level of certification you might receive. Certified silver, gold, and platinum is kind of the US GBC standard. This is what we use for LEED. This is what we use for True. This is what we use for a number of our different programs. This is an outline of all of the requirements that we have to hit certification. So like I said before, they need to hit 90% as a minimum to be able to participate. They need to be tracking their data. They also need to be meeting all federal, state, and local solid waste regulations. They need to be managing their hazardous waste. They need to have a zero waste policy in place. There's a lot of different stuff that they need to do. These are our minimum requirements to participate. I'm pretty sure that we're going to be able to send this slide deck around after the fact, so don't feel like you need to memorize anything that's on the slides. I know there's a lot of content in some of these. This is an overview of the categories and points that we have. You can probably see that a lot of these line up with this zero waste hierarchy, right? So like the top three left, redesign, reduce, reuse, all points associated with things related to those sections. Of course, we do have a compost section. We also have a recycling section, but as you'll note, middle left, there really aren't a lot of points associated with it, right? Because typically people already have robust recycling programs, and it's like, that's fine, they're already doing that. We don't need to give them more points for it because it's what companies are used to doing. We want them to focus on different stuff. We want them to focus on the upstream. We want them to focus on leadership and training in the top right, some of these other things that really make a successful zero waste program. This credit outlines when we're talking about the materials management, how many points we have allocated towards upstream decisions versus downstream decisions. This doesn't factor things in like training and things like that. It factors in specifically ways that they're managing their materials. As you can see, we're very heavily weighted on those upstream choices from that zero waste hierarchy. So it's really embedded into every aspect of the certification. This is just a snapshot out of our rating system. I know there's a lot of material on here. I think it's helpful to see what the credits actually look like. So on the left, you can see this is just an image of a number of the different credit categories and the associated points. Again, I can send this around so you can read it on your own time. But it addresses all the different ways that we've identified, like under leadership, what does that actually mean to be able to get to zero waste? What are the credits that would be associated with it? And then on the right, this is kind of the overview of each individual credit. So we lay out the intent, the requirements, the strategies, and the documentation that's required. So we really want our facilities to use this as a roadmap. Kind of the idea is that a project or facility, a company would come to us and say, hey, we're trying to develop a zero waste plan. We're at like 30% diversion right now. how do we get to 90%? And we would say, okay, follow this rating system. This all in there for you. Every single credit that we've embedded within the rating system is a strategy to help them get to zero waste. So, you know, it's far less typical that someone would come to us and say, oh, we're already at 90%, we want to get certified. That does happen from time to time, but really we'd prefer that they use this as a roadmap, because it's there to make everybody's life easier, right? It's there because it's a successful way of getting to zero waste. Okay. So for eligibility, we're meant to be a flexible program where we're really meant to be adaptable to a number of different project types. And we really see that in the facilities that have come through and gotten certified. You know, we have museums, we have higher education, we have a park that recently registered to go through the process. So we'll have our first zero waste public park, which is really exciting. We have commercial office buildings, we have manufacturing. We really have a little bit of almost everything at this point. We also have a couple newer offerings, which is true for events. So when events start up, you know, the events industry is a notoriously very, very wasteful industry. If you think about all the swag and all the, you know, single use one day items that get used. And so we have true for events, which is really meant to tackle that. And then we also have a true for construction pilot for any construction projects that are looking to go zero waste. If you remember that slide that I showed towards the beginning, that kind of showed the ramp up of LEED certifications. This is, you know, just to kind of compare, this is where we're at with True, just shy of 200 projects, but well on our way. We are a global program, so we've certified facilities all over the world. This map is slightly out of date. We now also have Brazil and South Africa on this map, and I'm not sure if there might be another one or two. Some of these countries are really small, so it's hard to see which ones are highlighted or not, like especially in Europe. But yeah, we do have more in South America and also our first in Africa, which we're really proud of. This is just to note some of the larger companies that we work with. We work with small companies as well, small businesses, but we do have some of these larger companies that have made a long-term investment that are going through and certifying their facilities you know, across various regions, and that's been really exciting. In addition to a straight certification, we also have something called pre-certification, which is basically available to any facility that has like a zero waste goal or a zero waste like strategy, but they're not able to get to 90%. A really good example of this is some of our facilities that we had that had 2020 goals, but with COVID, they maybe weren't able to meet their goal. And so we came up with this idea of true pre-certification, which rewards those projects for taking preliminary steps, for meeting a certain number of our requirements, for meeting a certain number of our goals. And it basically is a great way for them to demonstrate that they're on their way. So they can, you know, that can be used as a motivational tool for their employees, so that everybody sees that they have this goal and they're committed to it and they're, you know, on their way to doing it. It can also be taken to upper management, so the, you know, upper management can verify that the various ESG goals are being implemented, and it can also translate to consumers as well. And then similarly, if we had a facility that's certified at like silver or something, and they wanted to come back and recertify at gold or platinum, then we have a pathway for that. LEED Zero, I probably won't get into too much detail with this, but basically this is for LEED certified projects that wish to demonstrate net zero performance in other sustainability areas, such as net zero energy use, net zero water use, or net zero waste. As you can imagine, True supports this program in the waste area. So if a LEED certified project also receives True certification, platinum certification, I should say, they're eligible for to earn LEED Zero Waste, which is a really awesome collaboration between the LEED program and True. We do a lot of education and training. If it's something that's interesting to you, I definitely would say, you know, get involved. We do a lot of free webinars. We write articles, we do case studies, we do a lot of fun stuff. We also have internships. I know there's a lot of students on here, so if it's something that you're passionate about, feel free to reach out to see if there's ways to get more involved. And along those same lines, we have a professional certificate program called the True Advisor, which might be especially interesting. And this is something that maybe Dibs and I can even talk about if there's, a group of students that are interested in this. Maybe we can come up with some sort of like special pricing or introductory rate for that. We really support students going through the program. It's basically a training program in zero waste issues. It gives you a full training on, understanding how to essentially run a zero waste program at a facility. And then also, of course, it dives specifically into issues related to True.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, yeah, we can talk more about that for sure.
Absolutely.
Cool. True Advisors, again, similar to our certification program, also is a global, we have, global advisors everywhere. We just hit the 1,000 mark in 2020, which we were really excited about. These are a bunch of our True Advisors in action. They are typically the ones that are, in the field, on site, really making things happening, doing the zero waste audit, or, helping with employee training or something like that. And they really make the vision a reality, which is awesome. And in the top right, you can see a bunch of students that we worked with that all participated in our global green build conference and expo event to make sure that we met our diversion rate and that people put things in the correct bins, which is, of course, as you can imagine, a big challenge with a huge conference like that. So I think I'm doing okay on time. I'm just going to go through a couple of these zero waste strategies because I think it might be relevant for you guys.
Yeah, you have time, Celeste.
Okay,
no worries there.
Great. So I just want to quickly talk about the difference between a waste audit and a zero waste audit. So if you're familiar with the idea of a waste audit, it's basically it's essentially going through your trash. And it sounds gross, but it's a very cool exercise. And it's pretty much like a necessary step if a facility or a company has any sort of waste diversion goal at all. You really can't figure out how to reduce your waste unless you know what your waste is. So I've even done this at home on a personal level. Like if I want to reduce my waste, I'll save up all of my recycling or I'll save up all my trash for a month and then I'll look through it and what's in it. Like, why is this material in here? Is it going to the right place? Like, what kind of waste am I creating? Typically a waste audit is mostly to reduce contamination. So it's mostly making sure like your compost isn't ending up in your recycling and your recycling isn't ending up in your landfill and that kind of thing. It's a big problem, especially, in like break rooms at, facilities with a lot of employees and things like that. It's just like hard to get the signage right. So contamination can be a big issue. And so most companies that have waste reduction goals will do a waste audit. The difference with a zero waste audit is that you're actually really trying to identify what materials that are in there that can be eliminated from the waste stream altogether. So this is typically going to be like a aspirational goal. It's not something that we necessarily expect to happen overnight or even in 5 years, but it's something that you can look at, like, why do we have all these water bottles, or why do we have all these styrofoam coffee cups? Maybe we should stop buying styrofoam coffee cups, and that way we can work towards no longer needing that landfill bin. Maybe we still need a compost bin, maybe we still need a recycling bin, but maybe there's a way we can remove everything from our trash bin. And I would even argue, I love to compost and I do have a composting background as well, but if I can donate something, or if I can find a way to repurpose, reuse something, like make it into stock or something before I compost it, it's always better to reuse material or divert it to someone that can use it. Even if you realize like, oh, you're just buying too much broccoli, maybe you need to buy less broccoli because it's ending up in your compost. It's always better for that material to be handled upstream before it gets composted, because that's downstream. And similarly, there's this idea of knowing where your materials come from. So the waste audit, again, is typically going to start at the it's going to be like once the material's already in the waste bin. That's when you do the waste audit. It's like after the useful life has passed. But the zero waste audit, it really starts with the person that's creating the waste. It starts like before something gets downcycled. And then this slide is, I know, kind of hard to see. It's small, but I want to highlight it. And if it's interesting, I can send around a better copy of it. But this is a diversion spreadsheet from one of our certified projects that was okay with it being shared in a slide deck. And what you can see in the top left is this idea of a diversion calculation, and then followed by a zero waste diversion calculation. So the reason we do it this way is because, again, companies are really used to tracking their recycling, tracking their composting, and tracking their landfill. What they're not really used to tracking is things like reuse or reduction or redesign or something like that. That usually does not end up in a diversion tracking spreadsheet, but we want it to. And that's why True is different, because it actually incorporates the upstream ideas into their diversion numbers. Here's an example of that. If you worked for a company that had been buying those styrofoam cups, coffee cups, let's say, or actually, no, that's not a good example. Let me use a different one. If you worked for a company that had been buying recyclable water bottles, let's just say that, and those water bottles were used by the employees, and then they were going into the recycling bin, it would probably be making your, make your recycling numbers look pretty good, because you had all this material that you were adding to your recycling. So it makes your landfill number look smaller because you have more water bottles in your recycling. Now you make a choice, because you're trying to focus on zero waste, you make a choice to no longer purchase those water bottles. All of a sudden, you no longer have that waste stream in your recycling bin. So even though you reduced an item from your downstream numbers, your landfill numbers might go up, right? Because it's not getting offset by this large amount of recyclable material. So that's a flaw in a diversion calculation, because it's not properly reflecting the positive choice of reducing something and taking it out of, taking that material out of a downstream waste stream, if that makes sense. So we want our facilities to actually incorporate these positive choices that they're making, and we encourage them to actually put them into the diversion tracking numbers. Okay, so this is just a quick selection of a few of our projects. Sierra Nevada is one of our favorite projects. They have a couple of different sites. They were our first true platinum. They have an insane diversion number, 99.8. That's like almost unheard of. They do a lot of cool stuff with composting. Being a brewery, they have a huge opportunity to do that. They also have like a restaurant on site, and so they, divert all the material from the restaurant as well. So they work with the public too. So it's really a phenomenal effort. This is a museum in St. Louis, which I think is also cool in the way that they've figured out a way to be a public and government space, but still be zero waste and work with, the restaurant on site, the people on site, everyone that's visiting the museum, but still achieving zero waste gold, true gold. Westbourne is a small restaurant in New York City, currently closed due to COVID, unfortunately, but we're hoping that they find a way to reopen once the pandemic is over. They were a zero waste restaurant from the very get-go, and then they found a way to adapt their strategies to be able to fit into the True certification program, because again, they were proud of the fact that they could say they were zero waste, but because they didn't have a certification to go along with it, it was really hard to back up that claim. So it was a good way for them to actually get that verification. And then this is another image from Greenbuild. Like you saw those True advisors in that one slide. Greenbuild is always a True certified event. I'm really proud of the work that they do. Again, we went virtual this year, but hopefully next year we'll be back in person. So that's us. We want you guys to think of us as the certification that goes beyond recycling. Yeah, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer any of them right now.